Hey Kipsters, it's Mr. Zendejas. I'm over career integration for KIP Texas in Houston. I understand some of y'all might be watching this in other cities, and so I want to make sure that you know who I am if you don't already. Today's module is the first of a pretty long set of content and lessons on the military. So this is part one of two. Part one is a few hours long, y'all. We want to make sure that if you're interested in exploring the military as a career option, that you have plenty of information. There's a lot of information out on the internet and videos that is a little biased, a little opinionated, and I've spent a long time, as well as with Miss Ojeda, who works also with me in career integration here in Houston, to find the stuff that is the most factual and is going to give you information that you can use to make the best decision for you. So, with that, let's go ahead and get started. Again, this is part one, Introduction to the Military. And I put on there other enlisted services. So we're going to focus primarily on the main four branches of the military: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. But there'll be some points where there are other enlisted services that we talk about, or you'll see some content on that's related. For example, the Coast Guard is not one of the four primary branches under the Department of Defense. In fact, it's in Homeland Security, not in the DoD. But they do use ASVAB scores, which is something we'll talk about a little bit here, but mostly in part two of this series. So things like that will overlap, and then we'll also touch on things like military academies, the Secret Service, Border Patrol, if you're interested in any of those areas, or if you never knew anything about it, now you might learn something and explore those as possible options. So, like I said, let's get started. All right. Hipsters will be able to. We have to have objectives, right? And I move myself up here so you can see my nice graphic. We're going to aim in this long series of lessons, and I'm saying this to set your expectation. We could have done this really shortly, but there's a lot of information and we want to give it all to you. In fact, that's why we split it into two parts, because the ASVAB will deserve its own section, as you see. But in this section, at the end of all that you do, you should be able to do the following things. Number one, identify the different branches of the armed forces under the Department of Defense, as well as other enlisted services. I already mentioned that, but we'll go into more detail in just a second. Number two, articulate the process for enlisting in a military branch. And you'll see that there are a few options, kind of the primary one for enlisting, and then also looking at potentially becoming an officer. Number three, explain the cursory details of work, pay, and benefits. What that means is there's a lot of information about the work process and selection in the military, how pay is handled, and the different benefits you receive. We can't cover it all, so what I did is pull out the most basic stuff that you need to know to help you make a decision. Number four, understand the expectations of basic military training, or BMT. That's also known as boot camp, and the quality of life concerns was once enlisted. So we'll talk about the process of thinking through what branches you might consider, selecting one, going through the enlistment process, right? But then what is it like once you get to and through boot camp, right? What is your life going to be like afterwards? I think that's important to note, because sometimes we make decisions based on one thing and don't really take into consideration the whole set of options and variables that are out there. And then finally, number five, from all of this, you should be able to make an initial plan for a career in the military. You'll collect all your information, get all your questions together, and start to answer them for yourself. I will qualify all of this and say I was not in the military. I come from a very big military family. I had a number of aunts, uncles, cousins that were in the military in different branches. I think we have almost all of them represented, as well as the police force. That doesn't make me in any way an expert or knowledgeable about it, but what I did do is I went through all this information that's out there, talked to a bunch of people that have that experience to vet the information for you. In fact, it's probably better that I do it objectively as an outsider, because every time I talk to like my uncle that was in the Navy, he's going to be very pro Navy. Or I have a cousin that went to the Air Force and he was not a good match for the military at all. And so he's very anti that branch of the military because his experience was not good for him. He does admit that if he had all this information, he would have made a better choice. And so I'm trying to eliminate the bias for you, and hopefully you'll see that. But before we get into all of this, I will say it's a little different from my other lessons in that I will provide information on slides and talk to you about some things, but I also went and watched hours upon hours of videos online and looked at hundreds of different web pages and sites to pull out the best information again. And some of those are going to appear on here. So it's not going to be me presenting directly. I'm going to hand it off to someone that maybe made a YouTube video, which is exactly what we're going to do right now. I want to start this off by introducing y'all to one of the recommended websites, which will be at the very end of the video, just in case you're like, oh man, what was that guy's name? What was his website? This is Official Shim. That's his website or his YouTube channel. And then he has Instagram and all that other stuff y'all do. But you'll see that on the video. And he's just going to talk about his thought process on why and how he ended up choosing the Navy. So let's hand it over to Official Shim.